r/AskReddit by Reddit and chill. People who've been kidnapped. How did you survive? I was kidnapped in my car. When I was 18. I had been stalked by the guy for at least a few days, saw the same truck follow me a couple times on my way to college campus. I was just about to get out of my car to go to a bookstore, and this guy jumps in the passenger seat with a gun. He made me drive out of town to a remote area where his truck was parked. Never found out how he followed me to bookstore without the truck. He wanted to keep the gun on me while he got out of the car because I had a mace thing on my keychain. As he was backing out, he slipped and lost his footing, and I took off in the car. I drove straight to the police station. He was never caught. Life pro tip: never, ever let someone move you through threat of violence. If they're trying to get you away from where you are, your chance of survival escape decreases exponentially if you comply. If they want to get you somewhere else, it likely means they're too scared of causing a scene, leaving evidence wherever you are. A lot of people say that if they are in your car to make sure you have your seatbelt on and crash into something in public, they won't want to stick around if the cops are called to respond to the accident as the logic. Seems like a good idea. I was kidnapped way before my memories formed, so this is all from my parents and the police report. Basically, a lady in the nursing ward decided to give me a spicy adoption by hiding me in some sheets and taking me out of the hospital. She was tracked down a few days later and I was handed back to my parents. She did mistreat me. Apparently I was a healthy normal child and she even bought the expensive stuff in order to take care of me. I got to meet her in my teens. I asked her why me, and it was because my family hadn't done the paperwork for me correctly, so I was easier to slip out and potentially give her more time to disappear with me. If you got more questions, feel free to reply to the message and I'll answer 'em. Edit. Forgot to mention. This was in 1998. I got to meet her when I was 17 in 2015. A spicy adoption, what a way to call it. Good thing nothing bad happened, except of course getting kidnapped. Mesh rugs. At the end of the ordeal everything ended the way it should have. I came out okay too, so it's not like I developed a subconscious fear of nurses or bedsheets or anything. When I met her again she seemed reformed enough to me. She showed remorse for her actions and I didn't decide to let my life revolve around one minor thing that I'm so unaware of that it might as well have happened to someone across the country. I was kidnapped when I was 7. It was by a very drug-ridden family member who told me he was bringing me out for ice cream. He left me on a bench outside of a bar when the bartender told him he couldn't bring kids in. It was a dirty biker bar in Las Vegas during the 90s. I was young, scared and didn't fully comprehend the situation. I was confused why WR didn't go to an ice cream shop. The family member came out with 2 men that fully ducking terrified me. One of them touched my curly bright red hair and smiled wide. I remember not knowing what to do, so I started singing Joan Osborne's What If God Was One of Us. They got freaked when I wouldn't stop singing and walked back in the bar. I was definitely a weird kid, but singing as self-defense was kind of smart. I was left alone on the bench again when a man walked up and asked me where my parents were. I told him I didn't get ice cream and wanted to go back to my mom, but my family member wouldn't let me. He walked in the bar but came out just a minute later and sat with me until the police arrived. 20 years later my mom saw that family member for the first time. He was on end-of-life hospice care but made it to another family member's funeral. When everyone was filtering out he was waiting on the bus home when my mom punched him in the face. I love my mom. I'm glad your mom got to do that. I love your mom too. Holy ducking shit. This thread has to set some sort of record for most serious replies on a heavy topic without the serious tag. I was kidnapped at 17 by goons my parents hired to take me to rehab when they found out I smoked pot. I was eating dinner with my parents when all of a sudden they got up and walked out of the room with no explanation. Then a few seconds later 2 huge guys showed up out of nowhere, blocking both the exits to the kitchen, and told me to come with them. Since they didn't identify themselves at all or tell me what was going on, I assumed I was being kidnapped for real. So I grabbed a kitchen stool and started swinging. I took one down but the other guy tackled and handcuffed me. After they forced me into a car. They explained who they were and that they were taking me to a wilderness program in Georgia. We were in DC, so I spent the next few hours apologizing, sucking up to them, and basically trying to get them as much on my side as possible. It worked because they stopped for food and told me they would take off the handcuffs and let me eat if I promised to behave. I was a model citizen all throughout dinner, and when we got back in the car they didn't put the handcuffs back on. A few hours later we stopped for gas. It was dark by then and I asked to use the bathroom. One guy was filling the car with gas, and I noticed the guy who was escorting me to the bathroom was limping badly. I learned later I shattered his kneecap with the stool, so I figured it was my chance to escape. There's a lot more to the story, but I'm on mobile. So long story short, I found a road, hitchhiked to the nearest town, and luckily still had my wallet on me to buy a train ticket out of there. I spent the next few months in hiding until I turned 18 and my parents couldn't touch me anymore. Holy shit. That's wild. Edit. Duck your parents. For real, what utter twats. Parents couldn't touch me anymore. Probably because they're in a federal prison. I don't know if I was actually kidnapped or just held hostage. It wasn't even a whole day. But a person pulled a knife out and backed me into laundry room and kept me there. That's held hostage, and kidnapping as the definition for kidnapping is someone taking you to a different room unwillingly. I see kidnapping can't happen in a laundry room, then it has to be a different room. A friend of mine was kidnapped on his paper route. The kidnappers' robbers wanted his van to commit a robbery. They handcuffed him and put a bag over his head and left him in the back of the van through the robbery. When they were done, they told him to count to 100 before he got up and took off the mask. Pretty crazy. Thankfully they were nice about it and didn't hurt him. Only physically. An experience like that is mentally traumatic. My grandfather paid the ransom. They did it again. My grandfather got me back and didn't pay the ransom the second time. No one ever heard from the kidnappers again. Did your grandfather have a very particular set of skills acquired over a very long career? My grandfather was a violent man. He was abusive towards me and my mother. He was like an evil god in our hometown in India. He kept our large family safe from outsiders most of the time, but was an a-hole overall. When I was 13, my dad was undergoing treatment for a tumor in his brainstem and was on steroids and a pill cocktail that made him low-key crazy. He had been abusing me for a while, and when I told my mom, she ended up taking my brother, 7, and I out of his house. 2 days later he shows up at my school and I'm thinking WTF, he's not supposed to be there. I run away and he and a few other teachers start literally chasing me. I finally stop and get pulled into the office where my mom is hysterically crying because she had gone to pick up my brother from his bus stop and he wasn't there. I told the administrators about the abuse and how I definitely didn't want to go with my dad, and because he played the cancer card they forced me to go with him. He took us back to his house where he promptly fell asleep without feeding us. No food in the house, and all we had was our book bags. A few hours later he took us to Walmart because he needed more pain meds, and while he was yelling at the pharmacist my brother told me I just saw mom. And I'm like, no way. But then I see a glimpse of her, so we run up to her crying and begging her to take us with her. My dad grabbed my arm and tried to drag me away from her and the cops were called. Long story short, they gave my mom custody and we got to go home. What type of school did you go to that they handed you off to a man that you didn't want to go with? It was his dad. And it wasn't too long ago that schools wouldn't bat an eye at letting a kid leave with a parent, even if the kid didn't want to go. Cases like this are why the laws and rules changed regarding who can pull a child out of school. Friend of mine was lured out of a bar and then kidnapped along with 2 other women. South of the border, shoved into an SUV, blindfolded, brought to a house, where the 3 of them were sexually assaulted by multiple men. Some of the people involved were bloody, having just killed and dismembered someone in the room next door. She told me she could hear that guy screaming. When it was over, the general consensus of the criminals that the easiest thing to do was to just kill them because they were tired and didn't feel like driving them back to the city. One guy, one of the original guys who had lured them, was the lone holdout to this plan. Said that he still had some energy, so he would just drive them somewhere and dump them. Which he did, leaving them on a road someplace. So basically, my friend survived on a whim of a criminal. Duck. I hope your friend can recover from that emotionally. It must have been terrifying. She's better, as in she has gone on with her life and has not let this define her or really affect her beyond being much more careful and security conscious. The violence is prevalent and been around long enough that it quasi-normalized. A few years after this, her brother was kidnapped and killed. That was much harder for her to accept, as you might imagine. I was coming from a party, drunk and stoned, and hailed an unlicensed cab on the street. This was before Uber and gypsy cabs were fairly common. After I got in the car, he locked the doors and informed me he would not be taking me to my destination. Because I was intoxicated, I don't remember a lot of details. Just that he was trying to kiss me. All I could think was just keep him talking. I exaggerated my drunkenness and tried to be a drunk girl annoying as possible. He eventually kicked me out of his car near a busy intersection and I ran all the way to the subway. Do I get bonus karma if I answer 2 AskReddit questions in the same comment? I knew my marriage was a mistake when I finally made it home and woke my husband up to tell him what happened. He said, "Glad you're okay." Rolled over and went back to sleep. We, the people of Reddit, are also glad you're okay. Ducking, like and subscribe.